Well, greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to today's upload. Before we jump on into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks, well, they're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Tonight's first encounter. Me, my two brothers, and one of their girlfriends were out enjoying the sunset at one of the many beautiful nature spots we'd love to go to. There's a lake there, so my brothers were fishing off the edge as we sat, made a fire, and watched. We'd been there quite a while. It was starting to get kind of dark now, and that usually means it's real dark inside the woods, and we still needed to walk back to the car. So, as we were getting ready to go, everything got dead silent. It was very odd. Birds had went quiet, no sounds from squirrels or any of the previous background noise from earlier. Nothing. After about what seemed like forever, but in reality was a few seconds, out of nowhere we started to hear howling and yipping from coyotes, and they didn't sound too far away. It sounded like there could have been 20 of them. My brother picked up his 12 gauge and told us all to move quickly. If those coyotes were hungry and in a big pack, we could be in some trouble. So we're in a full sprint back to the car. The coyotes sounded like they were getting closer and closer. At one point, like they were right on our tail. It was pretty scary. It seemed like they were after us at the time, but when I think back, I think they were running from something. Because no coyotes attacked us when we had stopped to get into the car. And there were 4 of us. We had to stop and open the doors. If they were after us, they could have easily taken one of us at that point. But right as we reached the car, it sounded as though they had made a turn left and were running off in that direction. But we were too spooked and wanted to get out of there. On the way home, we have this little pull-off that runs parallel to the main road. My brother noticed this little sign that's made by hand in wood that said, Werewolf Hollow. Mind you, we've lived here all our lives and we've never seen it. Been this way dozens of times before. Never once saw this sign. So we decided to take it because it piqued our curiosity. Along the pull-off is a guardrail. Behind that guardrail is a 70-foot drop to a sheep farm in our area. We round a turn where we couldn't see around, and we came upon this creature, huge and hairy. It had pointed ears that looked like a German shepherd's. It had these piercing yellowish-green eyes. The eyes were separated pretty far apart. The arms hung down to its knees and appeared to be at least 8 feet tall, hunched over. As we came around the bend, my brother stopped in the middle of the road. This thing was just staring at our headlights while we are trying to make sense of what we are looking at. It didn't look like a bear. What the hell else could look like that? After a few seconds, this thing turns around and takes one hand and lifts itself up over the guardrail and over the 70-foot drop, all in one swift motion. We were all a bit too creeped out to go and look and see if we could see anything. It was dark anyway. The next day, my brother and I went down to the farm at the bottom of the 70-foot drop, we had seen this thing jump over. We told them what we had seen and asked if we could maybe walk back to the property and see if we could find anything. As we were walking, the farmer is telling us about how sheep had been coming up dead with their throats torn out. Said it was the strangest thing because most game in the area hunt for food to eat. These attacks seem vicious without purpose, and that was the weird thing. He also told us that they had some saliva tested, found on the neck of one of the sheep. It tested positive for unknown canine. The wooden sign at the entrance of the pull-off was gone as well as when we had gone back. We saw these things, all four of us, with no hallucination. Bear was ruled out. All four of us agreed on that. There's no way it was a bear. The features this thing had, it was scarier than anything we'd ever seen. I thought maybe it was a new species. My personal opinion is we saw a real-life werewolf. The others are more skeptical than I am, though. Tonight's second encounter. I live in rural Idaho, about 5 miles from the res. Growing up, we heard all sorts of stories and legends surrounding the reservation. I'd have to admit I was a bit skeptical when it came to things we had heard. My best friend and I have always been drawn to the paranormal. When we were about 16 or 17, we decided to go for drives on the res at night. The area we live in has a very tight-knit community, and our little town has just over 10,000 people. We basically have no crime and everyone feels pretty safe, so driving around at night is no big deal. We went on our nightly drives fairly often with no experiences to note. One day we had heard a story from someone at school about an abandoned schoolhouse on the other side of the reservation. Just past the schoolhouse, there's supposed to be this small bridge that went over a large farming canal. The story was if you drove to the bridge and turned your car off, you could hear water babies. If you don't know what water babies are, there are many stories and legends stemming from Native American culture. Look them up. Anyway, we decided that was going to be our next driving destination. Neither of us had ever heard of a water baby cry, so we were interested. That night after dark, we jumped in the car and started to drive out there. The closer we got to the schoolhouse, the more uneasy I began to feel. We drove past the building that was supposedly the schoolhouse and stopped. On the bridge, I cut the lights and killed the engine. Silence. There was no sound but rushing water below the bridge. We sat there for what felt like forever. In reality, probably only 4 to 5 minutes had gone by. We heard nothing but the water. We started joking about the story being fake and decided that it was a bust and just go home. The keys were still in the ignition, so I simply tried to start the car. Nothing. The dash lights lit up, but it was not turning over. I had never had any problems with my car before. I tried a couple more times while talking to my friend, not wanting to freak her out. About the 3rd or 4th time, I turned to her and said, "I don't want to freak you out or anything, but my car won't start." Her eyes grew wide and she responded, "You're kidding, right?" I wish I had been. We sat there for a moment just staring at each other, not knowing what to do. If we called my mom, there was definitely going to be some ass chewing for being out on the res so late. So we decided to call one of our friends who has a truck. If the battery's dead, he'll just give us a jump. If not, he could tow us back to town. So we called and waited for him. Sitting in the middle of this bridge in my dead car, frustrated from the lack of experience and car troubles, we just wanted to go home. That's when I saw it. It's a well-known fact that the reservation has packs of wild dogs that roam around killing livestock, and there has been a few instances of them attacking kids and putting them in the hospital. This was no dog. I've seen coyotes and wolves, and there was no way in hell this thing was either of those. It was skeletal, like a malnourished animal, and was walking on fours, slow and low to the ground. It was walking along the canal toward the bridge. I smacked my friend, making her turn to see what I was staring at. We both stared at this creature slowly coming towards us in disbelief. Instinctively, I honked the horn. At least that still worked. This is where things get really weird. This thing stands on two legs, arms limp at its sides. I scream. I had never seen anything like this in my entire life. The best way I can think to describe is that it looked like Professor Lupin's werewolf form in the Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban movie. It was friggin' massive, standing at least 8 to 9 feet, and was just staring right at us. It took a couple steps forward. My friend and I froze. We were trapped in my car that wouldn't start. As it slowly started walking towards us, headlights appeared in the distance. As the lights came closer, the creature dropped back to all fours and took off into the hills where I assume it had come from. Our friend pulled up to help us, and both my creeped-out friend and I just kept quiet about what we had seen. He walked up to the car. I rolled the window down. He suggested we push the car off the bridge to the side of the road and pop the hood. So I threw it in neutral and got to the side of the road. My friend asked me to pop the hood, and we tried to start the car, so I did. The damn car started right up. I don't know what caused it not to start from before, but that night I had an experience I will never forget. I don't go out to the res anymore at night. I'd really rather not see whatever this thing is again. Tonight's third encounter. I live in Finland near the coast. 2 years ago I was out hunting. It was getting late and dark, so I decided to head back home. I had to walk about 2 to 3 kilometers through the forest to get to my car. It had gotten pitch black outside at this point, so I had my LED headlamp on for light as I walked. As I walked, I kept hearing unusually loud noises. I knew something big was moving. I was 100% sure it was a moose, as I've encountered lots of them in the forest, and they do make lots of noise and vibrations when they walk. I couldn't see anything, though, and it was getting closer to me. All of a sudden, this super awful smell hits me. It smells like crap and something really rotten. My hair stands up, and I raise my shotgun as my whole body instinctively tells me to run. I just stand still and listen as the sound gets closer. I see what looks like a humanoid figure standing on 2 feet, really tall. Had to be easily over 2 meters, but slender and muscular at the same time, and kind of crouched down posture. It looked almost like a werewolf from movies, but at the same time not. It was quite far away, so my light barely went so far, but I could see it. Its eyes were shining red from my headlamp as well. It looked to me for about 3 seconds, made no sounds. It was breathing weirdly. I think it could have smelled the 2 ducks I had in my backpack. It slowly walked away. Anyway, I told some friends and fellow hunters. A couple of them have heard and seen strange things as well, but nothing like this. Today's fourth encounter. We went hiking to this spot in Southern California, where we've been going for the last 13 years. Hiking trails are basically located all along the cliff. Some trails lead to a secluded beach, others lead to a cave. We took the trail that leads to the beach, and we usually kept walking longer than average person since we're more familiar with the terrain after the trail ends. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, we decided to hike back up the trail while watching the sunset. At the same time, the moon is rising in the opposite direction. This moon was huge, probably one of the biggest moons I've seen here. We decided once we got back to the top of the trail at around 5:30-ish to keep hiking along the same trails, which we've only been on once. The night was still young and plenty of families were still walking the trail. I decided to take a break after a short jog to enjoy the scenery and appreciate the moon. At this point, my husband and son were pretty far ahead of me, and all I could see was their silhouettes. The night was now upon us, and the fog from the Pacific was making its way up the cliff into the hiking trails. My husband and son decide to turn back and meet me because it's getting dark. My son begins to run past us. At this point, my husband looks towards his direction and sees a black silhouette of a tall person standing about 9 meters from my son. As soon as this thing notices that my husband is looking at it, it gets on all fours and takes off like an animal. He yells for my son to come back. He then tells me what he saw and says something is running across the trail. I'm scared of dogs, so the first thing I thought was stray dog running loose. He says no, much bigger than a dog, almost the size of a bear, but it had the silhouette of a man standing in the middle of the trail and took off on all fours as soon as I looked at it. He said this thing was darker than the dark around us. At this point, we're freaked out. We're hugging each other close, not knowing what to expect next. We're basically in the middle of the trail we've only been on once, with a crappy phone and no service. We looked around. The trail was completely empty with no one to be seen. We were basically the only ones there. The trail went from being packed with people to now us three being the only ones there in minutes, which made everything all the more terrifying. We decided to suck it up and walk back to our car, which meant we had to pass by where my husband had seen this thing on the trail. My husband said he thought he saw this thing run down the trail, but once we got to that spot where he saw it, the trail turned right, but the figure ran left. To the left was a fence and a bunch of tall brush, making it impossible for something to go that way. Whatever it was would have had to have jumped the fence to keep going the way it went. We never saw or heard it jump the fence, and better yet, we didn't even hear its footsteps or anything move in the brush. My husband said it just disappeared. We managed to keep walking along the trail while holding my husband's flashlight on his phone pointed at the fence and the bushes. The only thing I had on me was a water bottle, and I was ready to use it as a weapon. All we could hope for at this time was to see other people along the trail. Then we finally see lights coming from a motorbike toward the end of the trail. This person was going into the trail as we were relieved to be out of it and into the parking lot. When we finally got to the parking lot, it went from 50 cars to only 2. There was this couple outside taking pictures. At this point, even the person on the motorbike noped it back out of the trail and into the parking lot and left. As we made our way back to the car, I kind of joked with my husband how he might have seen a werewolf. He was still in shock and didn't say no, but he was still trying to process what he had seen. My son said he saw something crawling, and that's when my husband called him to come back towards us. He was very scared that night and refused to sleep by himself. We all slept in the same room. My son said he felt like something followed us the whole time home. I hope not. Anyway, we ended up watching this segment of the news by accident while having dinner, and we heard that today was the super blood wolf moon. Now I'm 90% convinced that we had seen a werewolf, 5% convinced we saw a shapeshifter, and 5% convinced we saw a shadow person. This location is notorious for many deaths, as it is on a cliff where many have died from falling over. When we first went there for the first time, there was a sign around the same place he saw this thing about a person who had lost its life due to falling off the cliff. Others have drowned around that location as well. Tonight's final encounter is one that I have already shared. It's a terrifying experience that came out of Tennessee. After I shared it a couple days ago, a lot more details have come out to make it even more terrifying. About a year ago, I moved myself and my family out to a home out in the woods of Tennessee. I wanted to be brief, but I need to get this off of my chest, and after looking into this matter a bit more, I have a lot more details I think will help paint a clear picture in the end, so please bear with me. The nights here can be extremely loud between the crickets, tree frogs, cicadas. It's almost deafening. One night, not too long after we had moved in, I had forgotten something in my car and headed back outside to get it. The first thing that struck me as odd was my dog would not go outside with me. My dog goes everywhere with me, as I am her whole world, but not this night. As I held the door open, she looked out, then looked up at me, and nope. So I walked out and shut the door behind me. The second thing that caught me off guard was there was not a sound. It was dead silent. Still shrugging this off, walking down my front steps and heading to my car. When I had gotten about 10 feet from the car, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt as though something was watching me. I looked around but didn't see anything. After I reached into the car for what I had forgotten to grab earlier, I had this feeling like something was moving towards me. I took a step back and checked around me, and all of a sudden I heard one of my hedges next to me that lined the walkway to our front door rattle. At first I thought it was a rabbit that I had spooked, as I had seen one just earlier the day. A few seconds later I heard what sounded like a large rock the size of a cantaloupe landing a few feet away from me. It hit the walkway and bounced into the shrub. I drew my gun and called out, "Whoever's there is about to be shot." After a few seconds, nothing, and I began to think maybe it was just some local teenagers messing with the new people. Holstered my sidearm, turned, and started walking back to the front door. Almost as soon as I turned toward the house, I heard this deep panting sound. It sounded like a huge dog, but what made me go back to the front door was it sounded like it was right behind me. I leapt up onto the porch, turned, and drew my gun again, expecting something right there, but nothing. There was nothing there. A couple of weeks later, I was on my front porch at night, sitting on the bench with my wife. She got up and went inside to get something, and as soon as she had shut the door, I heard that panting sound again, and I didn't see anything. Yet it sounded like it was right on top of me. The sound was coming from everywhere, and it was loud. Again, I couldn't see anything, so I jumped up and went into the house. Now, at this point, I was questioning moving here, but after nothing else really happened, I let it go. A month or so later, it was a really rainy, stormy night. This is 9 p.m., and my wife and I are enjoying listening to the rain and talking about how relaxing the rain is. Me, growing up in Oregon, loved the rain, and for the past 10 years, we lived in Vegas, where it would just dump the entire year of rain in a day, then be bone dry for the rest of the year. For my wife, who grew up in Nevada, rain was such a rare thing. She loved going outside and watching the rain. So for us, this is an enjoyable experience. Except this night, in particular, things took a weird turn. As we are sitting there talking about the rain and relaxing, my wife stopped me and said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "No." "Hear what?" She said, "I swear it sounded like a small child calling for help out in the woods beside our house." I said, "No, I didn't hear anything." After a few minutes of us listening intently, she said, "There it is again." I said, "I don't hear anything, sweetie. Are you sure you're not just hearing things?" She looked at me offended that I didn't hear what she said. "No, I'm positive. How can you not hear that? It was our son. I think he's out there. I think he got lost." I said, "No, he's in the house sleeping on the couch." We then both looked through the blinds that were open right behind us, and we could see all our children laying there. She said, "That's so weird. I swear it sounded like our son." I said, "Well, it is not. He's right there. Besides, I didn't hear anything." She then stands up and says, "Wow, he's really crying out for help. I need to go look for him." Now, at this point, if you knew my wife, you would know she is absolutely creeped out by the woods and would not be caught dead walking into them during the daytime, much less the night in a storm. I grabbed her hand and said, "I've been listening intently, and there is absolutely nobody calling out for help. You need to stay here." At this point, I am getting worried about her. She is acting completely out of character, not to mention that at this time she's 8 months pregnant with our baby daughter. She then says, "What if there's some child out in the woods lost?" I said, "Well, first off, I'd be able to hear them too. Secondly, there are no other kids around here for miles, and the odds of them being lost 100 feet from our house that's lit up like a Christmas tree is nil." She then says, "I know, but what if it's a kid?" Before I could say anything else, she stands up and starts walking toward the stairs. I jump up and grabbed her hand again and said, "No, you're not. Get in the house." I don't know what's going on, but you need to get inside. She then complies, and we both go inside. I don't know what this is, but it freaked me out. A few months after this, as it's getting dark outside, I heard the front door of our house open. I got up to investigate. We have autistic 6-year-old twins, and we have the door set up so they cannot open it without us there. So to hear this sound, it could only be my wife. What's weird was the fact that she usually doesn't go outside without saying something to me. I walked out front and saw my wife walking down our private road toward the drive on the side of our house. I asked her what she's doing, and she says she was sitting on the back patio and kept hearing a baby crying in the woods. I said, "Seriously, and you just decide to walk off into the woods and investigate?" She then looks out into the woods and says, "See, there it is again." Again, I can't hear anything, but what I did notice is that it's completely silent out again. I told her, just like before, the chances of a baby being lost out in the woods is slim to none, and to get back to the house. She said, "What if somebody left a baby out there?" I said, "Well, if that were true, I'd be able to hear it." Now at this point, I'm really starting to worry about my wife's mental health. I actually asked her to see a psychiatrist, and she did. Now looking back, I feel really bad about this, knowing what I know. A key to this moment was that my wife had just given birth to our baby girl a month before. A few days after this, we're out on the front porch. It's early evening. I had just mowed the lawn that day. Our 3-year-old son is riding around in his little car in the front of the house. Now he knows that he is not allowed outside of a certain area that we had mapped off, and he loves playing outside. But with the road being 50 feet from our front porch, we have to be careful, as a lot of boaters will fly by through after drinking all day on their boats. As we are talking, we're both keeping an eye on him. A neighbor drives by and stops and says hi for a second. This interaction took approximately 8 seconds, as all they said was, "How are things?" We said good, and he told us he'd stop by later as his wife got something for the kids, who happens to be one of their teachers at school. We said, "Okay, great," and he drove off. I look over where our son was, and he's gone. I called out his name and ran over to the side of the house, and I could hear his car on the side of our drive. I scolded him for leaving the area, and he said something in his 3-year-old gibberish and pointed to the woods behind our house. I said he has 5 seconds to get back up to the front, or else. And he adamantly pointed back to the direction of the woods and kept trying to tell me something. I looked off in the direction of the woods and just assumed he had seen a deer or a squirrel or something and wanted to see it up close. I walked him back up to the front of the house. He cried the whole way there. He got real upset, and I wouldn't let him go to the woods. But I just wrote this off as him being curious, and most 3-year-old boys are. Now, this incident isn't isolated, as our twins had done similar things, but nothing quite as extreme as this. There have been nights where we had just lied down for the night and heard a loud bang on the side of our house on the wall beside our bed. It was so loud that I had jumped up and looked out the window. Our floodlight had come on, but I couldn't see anything. Weird part about this is that our bedroom sits 12 feet from the ground. I put on my slippers and grabbed one of my 12-gauge shotguns and walked outside to investigate. It was dead silent again. The floodlight that's on the side of the house had clicked off at this point, so I walked over to the end of the deck and shined my light around the yard. Nothing. I walked around the house and shined the light around intently. As I approached the back side of the house, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. It felt as though someone was watching me. I shined my light up in the trees, but nothing. I rounded the corner, and the first thing I noticed was that my 3 dogs that were in their area weren't making a peep. Now, our dogs have no filter and will bark at anyone and everyone. This includes me. So to see them just hiding with their tails between their legs, not making a peep, really worried me. As I kept walking, all of a sudden, the crickets and frogs started making sounds again. It was as if someone had clicked on a switch. I walked back to the house and told my wife that I hadn't seen anything. She shrugged it off and said, okay, as long as our dogs are okay. Due to the circumstances that night, I decided to let the dogs in and sleep with us. This very same thing has happened on all 4 exterior walls of the house. It's random, annoying, but just like this instant, every time there is nothing when I go outside. There have also been times where we're just sitting in the house, and as I'm watching a movie with my wife, she'll ask me if I called her. I said no. And she said she swears she heard me say her name. She said that's definitely my voice, but she didn't understand because it sounded so close. And I was a good 20 feet away from her in my recliner. The important part to this is she's sitting at the table doing something, and the slider to the backyard is open behind her. Now, our back patio seats are about 20 feet off the ground, and there's a balcony, no staircase access. I think the previous owner built it for a barbecuing. There have been several instances where she would say she heard someone whisper in her ear, but she couldn't make the sound out. Again, I kept thinking she's going crazy. But, as you will see, I think all of this is tied into the final moment where things are revealed. The last thing I want to mention before we get into what just happened is I have a shooting range built behind my workshop on the opposite side of our property next to the main road. It's kind of down on a slope, but it works perfectly for what I need it for. The range itself is cut straight into the woods, going down about 100 yards or so. When you're at the downrange, you have the woods surrounding you on all sides except back up to the shop. I have to say it has always felt creepy when I'm dealing with my targets or mowing. When you are down there, it feels like you're miles from anyone. One day at around 5 at night, I was sighting in my new rifle scope. The sun is still up, but it's starting to fade, so I knew it's going to be the final test. Up until this point, nothing really happened while I was making my multiple trips downrange, other than the feeling of uneasiness. As I got downrange, I just got this feeling like someone or something was watching me. I looked around and didn't see anything. As I was placing stickers over my previous shots, I heard something big off to the side of me. It sounded like a large branch had snapped off the tree. Now, if you've been in Tennessee woods, you know there are a lot of branches and they fall off trees randomly out of nowhere. So it's nothing new, except this time it was very loud and sounded like a fresh, strong wood that makes no sense. I turned and looked, but again, I couldn't see anything. I started walking back up to my rifle, and I swear I heard someone right behind me. I turned around again and saw nothing. As I start to walk again, I hear this deep growl. It was very deep and loud, and what's worse is that it was all around me. I turned around facing the range and started walking backwards. The thought of some rabid dog charging out of the bushes had me freaked out. So running was not a good idea. I slowly walked backwards up the hill to my rifle, but nothing happened. I grabbed my rifle and sprayed the target with rapid fire, hoping to scare off whatever was stalking me. I left 10 rounds in the magazine and grabbed my rifle bag and quickly walked back to the house. I never told my wife about this, as I didn't want to freak her out. Now, Fast forward about a year later from when we moved in, and my niece is staying with us as a live-in nanny to earn money over the summer for her college. We were on our way back from the store, about a mile from our house, and I see two eyes reflecting in the headlights coming from a wide tree on the side of the road just ahead. I had caught my attention because they were higher than a deer, in different color and size. Just as I had said, "What is that?" and squinted, they vanished. I'd made a comment that it was almost as if it knew I could see it. And it moved. The color was kind of a golden green, but they resembled the mannerism of a large cat, and they felt ominous. It's hard to explain, but I shrugged it off as we were passing the tree and saw nothing. A few moments later, we arrive at the house, and as I'm getting the bags out of the car, my 3-year-old son bolts out of the house excited to see me. As I was waiting to help my niece carry in the bags, I hear the dog growl. I look in the direction she was looking at, my neighbor's property across the street. Now, what I saw has kept me up all night. Up until this point, I have always been skeptical, as I have never seen anything with my own 2 eyes. Even with what happened to me the year prior, I still had my doubts that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Now, my street is kind of spread out. Each house sits on several acres, and at the end of our road is Kentucky Lake. My neighbor's house sits adjacent to my house on about an acre lot. Directly in front of my house is a wall of woods, and directly behind my house is several thousand acres of untouched forest. As I was looking across the street to my neighbor's property, I saw a large, dark figure between the trees at first. The movement caught me off guard, as it looked like something big moving quickly on all fours. Then, when it came out into the clear view, it stood up and walked like a man. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. It was very tall. But what was strange about it was the distance it covered. And the fact was, when it was in front of the shed, I swear I could see through it. It was clearly walking quickly and moving faster than any person could sprint. More importantly, there was no sound. It was like it was phasing in and out of reality as it moved. I said, "What in the hell is that?" and realized that it was looking directly at us. It had moved at an angled way from us to minimize its time out in the open, and moving quickly as it could while still being silent. The hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. I realize that whatever it is stalking us. I told my niece, "Get in the house now," and I grabbed my son and booked it in as well. I grabbed my AR-15 with a short scope and looked back outside to see my niece is still grabbing stuff off the car. Knowing I had told her firmly and clearly to get into the house, her disregard for my command annoyed me, but still I watched over her without saying a word. As she was slowly walking, she turned toward the woods across the street from my house and suddenly bolted to the house. She ran up the steps in a panicked state. I asked her what she had seen. Her face was pale white. She said, "I heard something big in the woods walking loudly on the leaves, and when I turned towards it, I heard a deep guttural growl." I asked her why she didn't come in when I told her, and she said she thought I was talking to my son. I told her what I had saw, and she wanted to get a closer look and see if she could see anything. I told her that's not a good idea, and she went anyway. As she's walking down the walkway, I heard the sound of dry leaves crunching in the woods across the way. I told her to stop and take a flashlight. Now at this point, she's 6 feet away from my wife's SUV. As she turned and started walking back to me, I caught the glimpse of something gray and hairy bolt from behind the SUV back across the street into the woods. My porch is a raised porch, and our SUV is about 6.5 feet tall. And whatever this was, it cleared 45 feet in what looked like one jump. It moved like lightning. Whatever it was, it wanted my niece. It jumped behind the car out of my line of sight and was waiting for her. I still doubted my warnings, and she still doubted my warnings, and grabbed the flashlight and walked back toward the car. As she was entered the driveway, She stopped dead in her tracks. Leaning forward like she had seen something, I asked her what she saw. She turned and ran back up to the porch with a terrified look on her face, saying no, no, no over and over again. She said she saw a figure hiding inside the tree line, and that she had seen its eyes. I asked her what they looked like, and all she could say was they looked dull red at first, but when she got closer, they looked dead. I said, "What do you mean, dead?" She said the pupils looked gray, like the way eyes look when they go blind. She said it was really dark gray, and she swears she could see through it, almost like a dark cloud. She wanted to go out again and took a step down the stairs, and as she did that, it revealed itself from behind the tree. I said, "Get inside," and I went in and locked the door. It looked like a tall, human-shaped being. It was very tall, and it looked ominous as hell. The next morning, we did a height comparison to the tree limb she had seen it standing by and put it around 9 feet tall. Its eyes were at least 6 inches apart. At this point, I don't know what this thing is. After doing some research, I think it was a crawler. I looked to see if there had been any other sightings in Benton County, but nothing. More importantly, I swear it would phase in and out almost like a shadow person, but bigger and more obvious. One of the things that makes this fit is that it can communicate telepathically. This explains why everyone was hearing something that nobody else could hear. Secondly, it had this playback-like communication. So, when I heard my dog panting, it was probably one of my dogs it had heard. My wife was actually hearing our son crying for help, as he had recently fallen and cried for help. The baby crying would be our newborn baby, who she had given birth to recently, and it must have heard me call my wife's name and kept telepathically calling my wife's name with my voice. Another thing that my niece had said that night was that she had felt compelled to go back outside. She said she felt like this thing was communicating with her somehow and wanted her to go back out. The more I read about this thing, the more everything has been happening over the past year makes sense. One thing I find extra convincing is that down the road toward the lake there's property that's barbed wired off and is a wall of forest with no driveway. The lot of the property down the road is undeveloped owned land, and on one of the trees there's a large sign that says "Screamer lives here," with an arrow pointing into the woods. Now I have to admit, when I saw that sign I laughed, thinking maybe the owner screamed at trespassers who entered his property, and teenagers put up a sign to mess with him. But when I did a satellite search of our neighborhood, the entire section of road has no houses or trails or anything, and it's just pure forest for as far as the eye can see. One of the things that this thing is said to do is make loud screams when threatened. Now that you understand my story, I doubt this is the ending. The next question is, what can we do? I don't want my wife or kids to disappear one day. And if there is more than one of these things out there, it really makes sense for people going missing. A whole lot of sense. I feel perplexed and scared. Folks, there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting this channel. After all, it is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, our family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events, well, they've happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.